right, welcome to Gen Z on Gen Z, the podcast that breaks down the generation so you don't have to. You got myself, AJ, senior strategist at Movers+Shakers.
And Lilia, another senior strategist at Movers+Shakers.
And we have a very, very special guest today that we are so stoked to introduce you all to. Erin Confortini, a wizard of financial literacy on TikTok. We are just obsessed with your channel, Erin. Just for context, Lilia and I definitely have some improvements that we need to make in our bank accounts.
Don't we all? We're not too great. We're too financially literate.
We are not. So we're super excited just to learn from you today. I'll pass the mic over to you if you want to introduce yourselves. And we're curious to know just from the get-go, like what your goal is on TikTok with the platform that you have and kind of the message that you're sharing out with your audience.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
We're so excited.
So my name is Erin. I am 24, almost 25. So kind of on the older end of Gen Z since this is a Gen Z podcast. But I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've been on social media for almost 3 years at this point, which is so crazy. It doesn't feel that long. But I've been doing this for about 3 years in the personal finance space, teaching Gen Z how to become more financially literate. My mission, I guess, on social media is just to empower young women that they can learn this stuff on their own and start taking steps with their finances. My kind of like money story actually comes from the fact that one of my ex-boyfriends was a financial advisor and he taught me about money, which is like great. It's fine. I'm financially literate because of it. But I hope to teach young women that they don't need a man to teach them about money and they can learn it on their own. So that's my story. And that's what I've been doing for the past 3 years.
Obsessed with that. I think that's so important. And I think it's such a trope too, that when you're on a date with like a finance bro or just like any man in general, they're teaching you how to tip or teaching you like these micro things. And they are helpful because I don't know all the ins and outs of any of that, but I love I love when people still try to like, not knowing what I do, still try to teach me. And then I just like am laughing to myself.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you again. We're super excited to dive deeper into that too. And I know obviously learning from previous relationships and everything, I saw that you posted something pretty recently of some popular podcasts and books as well of how you learned how to approach the subject and approach this vast field of question marks for a lot of Gen Zers. Curious if you have any, just off the top of your head, any recs, whether it is one of the books you shared or the podcast that we can get into to keep learning about all this stuff.
I would love to know.
This is my favorite thing to talk about because I think everyone really overcomplicates the subject of money and personal finance. But I like to say on my channel that the skill and the concept is really only 10 to 20% of what you need to know. And the remaining 80 to 90% is much more about the financial discipline aspect. So if you feel like you're not financially literate, you're probably only a YouTube video or a book or a podcast away from really knowing everything that you need to know. It's really not that hard. But then once you learn the skills and the concepts, you need to actually apply it and remain financially disciplined kind of for the rest of your life. So it's kind of like an ongoing, ever evolving need to continue being financially disciplined. But I do love talking about this because it was really as easy as reading a couple of books and listening to a podcast. That was why I decided to start my own money podcast. But I've read probably like 10 to 15 personal finance books in my life. I've read a lot just because I'm interested in it, obviously. But the top 3 that I always talk about, and 3 of the first books that I read when I was trying to become financially literate in college were I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins, and The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Oh, and the 4th would be Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That one gets kind of like a lot of hate because the author is a little bit controversial. But it's all about wealth building and kind of understanding that you can do more than just living in the rat race that is working until the day that you die. So it has a good message behind it, but those are my top 4. And then on the podcast side, the Bigger Pockets Money podcast alone like, really changed my life. I've probably listened to hundreds of episodes of that podcast as well.
What about the podcast in particular is so helpful?
So they do have a lot of kind of beginner-friendly episodes that teach you the skills and the concepts, but then the rest of their episodes, which they probably have like 400 or 500 episodes out at this point, it's all about bringing other people on that have really cool money stories. So think someone that went from being a single mom, maybe they went bankrupt, they started from somewhere and now they've accomplished something really great with their money. And those stories are always just really inspiring because it teaches you that no matter where you're starting from, you can achieve X, Y, and Z, and you can either retire early, you can start investing in real estate, you can do all of these really cool things with your money, kind of no matter what the starting point is.
Oh, that's so like inspiring. I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it. I can figure it out. I can get out of debt.
For real. I want to quickly double click on something you mentioned within that of like the rat race of how we're just kind of working till the day we die. And that's something that previous generations have just ingrained in our brains of like, that's how it works and you're stuck there. I'm curious from your perspective, the unique kind of financial struggles and challenges that Gen Z has placed themselves into, or just by association with these older generations that are unique to us that maybe other generations might not fully understand or grasp.
Yeah, it's so interesting kind of seeing the dynamic of this, because you hear all the time on like social media, in the news, like the economy, it's so expensive. Everything's so expensive. You can't buy a house. Housing's unaffordable. You hear all of that. But at the same point, and I would say those are like definitely so very real challenges. However, on the flip side of that, we've never had as great of an opportunity as we do today to make money. So we kind of like are seeing this, yes, everything's expensive, but we're also in a situation where we have access to information like we've never had before. We have access to having separate streams of income from the traditional 9 to 5 or your typical day job. You can make money on top of that doing other things. So it's kind of this dynamic of, yes, things are expensive, but you can also make more money if you take advantage of the access to information that we have.
Such a unique perspective. I have not thought about that at all, because I think it is so much doom and gloom when you are reading these headlines, when people within your workplace are saying the same things and it's constantly all you're thinking about. So I think that's why so many of Gen Z have taken up content creation, or they've done different little things to help pursue any money making, because to your point, we just do have that access. It is unlike any other generation before us, for sure.
Yeah, and Gen Z is definitely kind of like pushing the barrier of, I guess, pushing back on the traditional work sense of just putting up with the fact that things are so expensive and salaries aren't keeping up with it. You know what I mean? The gig economy is the thing that you keep hearing about. Like more and more people are entering the gig economy because they want to make more money and they want to have more control over how much money they're making. So they're kind of taking it into their own hands and finding a way that's going to be lucrative for them.
Yeah.
We talked a bit about that in our first episode about money, and had this kind of discussion around gig economy, people monetizing their hobbies and the things that they're interested in. So, for example, you're interested in DJing, and then you create a DJ TikTok and you do gigs and everything. And we hear a lot about how once you start to monetize your hobbies, that could eventually suck out maybe some of the joy that you initially felt. Curious if that's something that maybe you've come into just through content creation, or if you've heard other friends kind of fall into that same trap, and if any advice comes to mind or perspectives on that of how to retain that sense of joy within this constant need and cycle to get more money.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think when you start monetizing your hobby in the sense of doing it through content creation and you're building your whole career kind of around people's perspectives and opinions on you, that can become really challenging, because we as humans are ever evolving and our hobbies and our interests also change. I know even for me, like I've really stayed true to the personal finance niche over the past couple of years, but my financial situation has changed. I started my TikTok account when I was first out of college on my post-grad salary, budgeting with that salary, and kind of focusing on restricting my expenses to be able to still have room to save and invest with my post-grad salary. But the goal was always to increase my income and live a more abundant life, but trying to get my audience away from how they knew me back then to now, when I have increased my income successfully and I am trying to use money more as a tool to live the life that I actually want to live. It's really hard to get your audience to kind of adapt with you. And I think that is why, from a brand or a creator's perspective, always remembering to share that lifestyle pillar is really important, because someone only knows me as the budgeting girl, but then all of a sudden I'm no longer the frugal budgeting girl, then they have no reason to follow me. But if they knew me for budgeting and they liked me, then that can like evolve a little bit better.
That's such an interesting challenge because as we know with TikTok in particular, niches are what cultivate communities. Niches are what kind of get people excited to follow you. So have you noticed a tension as you've kind of tried? Because I've noticed you put some more lifestyle content on your channel as well. Have you noticed a tension or what has the feedback been?
This is definitely something that I'm still working on. And I still find myself kind of gravitating back to that personal finance niche because that's what sells. And that's kind of what I've built my whole business around and starting the podcast. It's the Girls Talk Money podcast. Like I still want to lean into the niche, but kind of trying to find that balance of how do I bring all of that money content kind of inward? If I'm going to still talk about saving and investing, it has to all be inward to me because that's what's going to evidently grow my personal brand still around the personal finance niche instead of just putting out a ton of content that's very textbook. Like, here's how to invest, here's how to save, here's what credit card you need. That type of content really doesn't feel authentic to me.
Yeah.
And that's why I loved, you posted a video a couple weeks ago about the time versus money investment. And that was something that rang really true to me of like, you're not investing hundreds of dollars today, but you're spending that time to do something that makes you feel good and gives you the same mental benefit of investing a certain amount of money. I'm curious if you have any perspectives on how that could be applied to like broader Gen Z culture, how to kind of shift our mindsets to feel wealthy just by the way that we feel internally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So on the financial aspect, I talk about this all the time, how a lot of financial anxiety comes from the fact that a lot of people don't pay attention to where their money's going because they're afraid of what the numbers will say. They're afraid of how much money they spend.
Literally me.
But once they actually like put it onto paper and see where their money went, maybe the number is way higher than you wanted it to be. Maybe you totally went out of budget. You're still going to feel better. And this was something that I had to come around to back in college when I was trying to get a handle around my money. I was the very typical like budget for the first 10 days of the month. And then as soon as I started to go over budget, I would stop tracking my spending and like say, try again next month. And I did that for about a year and it was so counterproductive. I didn't get anywhere with my money that year. Then afterwards, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to commit to tracking for an entire month, regardless of what the number said. And I realized that even though I was over budget, I still felt better. I still had less financial anxiety because I was aware of the situation. Yeah. So I think that's a good example of steps that you can take without necessarily changing anything, but still becoming like more aware. And through that process, you're going to realize what transactions didn't bring you value. So where was I spending money this month that I shouldn't because I didn't get any value out of the purchases? And through that, you're going to start spending less and sticking to your budget and things like that.
I love that.
Love that. And
it scares me, but I love it.
Yeah. That value piece is really important too. If you're going to spend money on something, like make sure that it has that emotional benefit that'll make either you feel good or if you want to put it in the context of treat culture, you know, makes your day a little bit better. I'm curious, just you've seen any brands really capture that essence and that messaging and just prove that they understand we need to buy things, or if we're going to consume and spend our money, we're going to spend it in a place that gives us joy and gives us that value of, I feel like a better person now, essentially, for participating in that.
I guess on like the brand side, brands that I think are doing marketing well from a Gen Z perspective, I don't know if it necessarily comes back to spending our money wisely, but Gen Z is definitely more aware of the fact that they have endless options when it comes to where they spend their money. They have, there's so much competition. Everyone's starting a business. Everyone's starting a brand. If you want to buy makeup, you have a million makeup brands that you can choose from. So I think brands are like starting to get really creative on how they're marketing and how they're kind of capturing the attention of Gen Z. One brand that really comes to mind, it's like one of my favorite. I've purchased from them strictly because of this. So I kind of like know this to be true. Have you ever heard of the brand Waterboy?
I'm looking it up right now. I have not.
I don't think so.
They are, think like Liquid IV. So it's like a hydration packet for hangovers. Their TikTok is like my absolute favorite. But I think what they do really well is Gen Z wants to know the person behind the brand as much as they want to know what the product is. So they really want to see like the behind the scenes of building the brand. They want to see like who the founders are. They want to see the office. And Waterboy, through their TikTok account and their other social media pages, they do this really well. They kind of like build a community around like, hey, we're all building Waterboy together and you guys are going to see this product kind of come to life. And through that, Gen Z is becoming mega loyal to that brand and other brands that can effectively do this regardless of what the product is, because now they're rooting for the
team,
or the person behind the brand.
That's so cool. I'm looking at them right now. Their site looks awesome. I'm definitely going to give them a
look
follow.
at their TikTok. They do like office humor, the founders, the interns, everyone. I think they even, to hire their intern, they had people post a TikTok video as their resume or something.
Oh, cool.
So they're really just like getting people involved and kind of showing that community building aspect, which I think is what Gen Z is really looking for.
Totally. It's huge. Why do you think it's important for different brands to kind of understand either it's this level of interest Gen Z takes in knowing the backstory, in knowing the personal authenticity, or even going a level deeper and understanding Gen Z's financial situation? In your perspective, why do you think that's important?
I think the reason behind it is because Gen Z is really going to social media for so many different things in their life. At this point, they go to it for news, to learn something. Like if I have a question, I search it on TikTok, not on Google, because I would rather watch a 30-second video than read an article to learn how to do something. But they're also looking for community, for friendship, for those relationships. They're looking at kind of a single or a couple different social media platforms for so many different things. And they also use it to look at their purchasing decisions. So I think like just kind of as a brand thinking about it that way and kind of saying like, okay, how can we capture the consumer at like all of these different parts of why they're coming to this app in the first place.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the rise of TikTok Shop that we're seeing on socials. Like, let's say you go onto TikTok to be entertained and you're scrolling. Uh-oh, I see a post of this perfume that's $4, purchase, continue scrolling to be entertained. Yeah. Curious, just generally, your thoughts on TikTok Shop. If you bought anything, if you think it's something that's beneficial, or if it's something that's perpetuate our spending habits to a fault.
Yeah, 100%. I think, okay, so when it comes to millennials, you hear about like millennials getting into a lot of credit card debt because of how easy it was to sign up for a credit card. Like that was a very new thing when millennials were Gen Z's now age, I guess. Like it was super easy to get credit cards. So everyone ended up in credit card debt because of how easy it is. Well, now Gen Z is becoming so much more aware that we shouldn't get into credit card debt, but companies are then finding sneakier, like other ways to make it super easy to purchase. Yeah. So they're really taking that space away between like seeing a product and being able to purchase a product. Everything between one click buy on Amazon to Afterpay, or when you are like scrolling through something on your phone and the little shop pay or the link pops up and it just like pre-populates all of your information. It like gets you ready to buy right there. So TikTok Shop is another like interesting way. Yeah, you just hit a button and then all of a sudden you purchase something and it shows up at your door. So they're finding sneakier ways to really just make it so easy for people to spend money. I like TikTok Shop because I think it's fun just scrolling through and like seeing all the videos. I don't know. I like it, but it definitely perpetuates our spending habits for sure.
I've never heard that put to language before about the comparison of millennials and credit cards and this. Like yes. And it is crazy because we just do fall, victim sounds aggressive, but we do fall into these traps so often because it is so easy. This is just maybe a me question. What are your thoughts on Afterpay? Because that is an interesting thing that I do. And I need to know. Erin, what do you think about Afterpay?
So it definitely is the Gen Z version of credit card debt. I mean, it just is. It just is. And they market it so well because they say no interest. You can just pay in for $25 for that $100 item over the next 4 months. Like easy. However, I think the issue with, so I don't use Afterpay and I don't promote Afterpay. And the reason why I say that Afterpay is like bad from a financial perspective is because when you're using Afterpay for these little things like a shirt or a $100 pair of shoes, your propensity to spend that $100 on the shoes is at its peak before you have the shoes. And then you wear it for the first time and it goes like this. For anyone that can't see, I'm like doing a little like downward slope. So as soon as you wear the shoes one time, your propensity to spend money on those shoes has gone down so much because they're not new shoes anymore. So people, if you put a $100 sweater onto Afterpay, and then 4 months later that sweater has a hole in it, or it doesn't look good anymore because you threw it in the dryer a couple of times and now it's old and gross, but you're still making payments on it. All you want to do is go out and buy another sweater and put it on Afterpay more. So you really get into like this spiral of constantly putting things on Afterpay until you have a huge balance and you can't keep up with your monthly payments. I also just think it's so wild. I didn't know you could put flights and things like that on Afterpay.
Erin, I've done that too. Oh my God. Oh my God. No, it's bad. And I don't think it's good. I want to clarify. I don't think it's good. But yes, flights, it's crazy.
Even if like Klarna or Afterpay isn't an option, it still gives you the option to pay in 4 installments on anything.
Yeah.
It's wild.
So it's definitely just these sneaky ways that, I mean, it's the same thing with 0% interest credit cards for 12 months. A lot of people will sign up for these and be like, oh, I can put it on my credit card because it's 0% for 12 months. But then the end of the 12 months comes around and all of a sudden, you have to pay it and you get hit with a lot of interest when you can't pay it.
And I think it all goes back, you said this earlier, about really changing the behaviors and kind of the discipline that goes into spending money. When you're doing Afterpay, that's not discipline. And again, I can speak from experience. You are giving in to the overspending behaviors. You're giving in to these things that are not going to retrain your brain to be smarter with your money.
And I think from like kind of a Gen Z and like what brands should understand and take away from this conversation is Gen Z is, I think, becoming more aware of all of this. They are becoming more aware of the fact that you see influencers on social media kind of like flaunting very lavish lifestyles. And before, it was almost everyone else can afford all of these things, so I should be able to afford it too. And even though you're not paying attention to your finances, you are putting all of your new clothes onto credit cards or on Afterpay, or even just spending them out of your bank account, but you're not saving any money every month because you're shopping so much or going out to eat so much because everyone else can afford it, so why can't you? Well, I think Gen Z is starting to realize that that's not really the case. And just because they have a good job doesn't mean that they can afford to live without a budget or live without restricting their spending to some regard. So I think Gen Z is becoming a lot more aware.
Do you notice within your comments or maybe messages you receive, are you seeing the shift firsthand, or is this something that you just have noticed through your own experience on social thus far?
Yeah, I would say like the comments that I get and the DMs that I get are people kind of saying that they like are becoming aware to this. Like, oh, my
clearly
salary.
If they're watching your videos, they
because
are
when you think about the age of Gen Z, and I would say my audience is definitely older Gen Z. I don't put out a lot of content for people who are still in high school or just graduating from high school. It typically is the kind of person leaving college, entering their post-college adult life. People are realizing, hey, I went to college to get a good job and I got a good job, so I just thought that I would be able to spend whatever I wanted to spend, and that's so not the case. And I preach that all the time on my channel, just the importance of, before you even get your first job, before you leave college, make sure you're sitting down and creating a budget for yourself, because you're probably going to realize like, oh, that paycheck that I get is going to go pretty much straight to bills and I'm not going to have that much money left over. So just kind of like facing that and kind of creating a plan moving forward for how you're going to get out of that is really important. But Gen Z is, I think, becoming increasingly more aware.
I mean, that even, again, I'm giving a lot of personal anecdotes because I just am the target audience for the conversation. It's just crazy. But I remember when I got, and I'm like a millennial Gen Z cusper, so I like teeter the line there. And I remember when I got my first big girl job out of college and they paid for me to move to New York, and it was this really exciting thing. I had a salary that was more than what I was making at my part-time job in college, and I had a credit card. And I remember that's how I got myself into credit card debt, was because I was so excited and I had never had limitations before, and I never had this opportunity. I'm in New York. Of course I'm going to spend money on my credit card because I'll just pay it my next paycheck. But then once you get to like 1,000, you're like, oh, well then I can pay it next time. And then you keep building it. I agree. And my sister's she's younger than me. And that is something that she's so hyper fixated on not falling into the same traps that I did. And I agree. I think it's because you mentioned earlier the access of information we have. We have so much information. We have accounts like yours. We have podcasts. We have books. We have all these things that people didn't have 10 years ago even. So it's kind of guiding them, I think, to your point, in that direction, to just be more aware And even if it takes them a while to fix it, they're at least more aware, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's so true. I remember, and obviously the only reason why I kind of didn't fall into that trap was because I was so in tune with my numbers in college. So I was super thankful that I did kind of take the steps to become financially literate in college before I made those really big budget breaking decisions, like signing a lease in a 1-bedroom apartment that's super nice, that's over half of my monthly income, or getting a brand new car. I did have a car payment, but I didn't get a brand new, super nice, fancy car. Luckily, my student loan payments weren't super crazy, but I remember kind of making my fake budget before I graduated from college, before I started my first full-time job. And I had a pretty good salary. I got a really good job out of college. And I realized that the only way I was going to be able to afford rent, my car payment, and my student loans was if I got a 4-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates. So I had like so many roommates graduating from college. My rent was super cheap because of that, obviously, but that was the only way I was going to be able to afford everything and still have money left to like save and invest every month. So that's what I did. But I think a lot of people just assume, oh, well, I'm getting a good job, so I'll just go get whatever apartment I want. Literally. And then they get their first paycheck and they're like, wait, this doesn't go very far.
Yeah.
What do I do now?
But going back to what we were talking about of getting out of college and the budgeting that Gen Z's, it's their responsibility to do that if they want to save and invest each month. I'm curious, is that the largest conversation that you're seeing within your comment section and within your community, or is there a lot of added volume around the conversations of investing, or is it, I'm curious to know kind of that breakdown of what people seem to be the most engaged within.
Yeah, I think when it comes to my content, what performs the best, because that shows what people are engaged in. Anytime I make a video on high yield savings accounts, it pops off. It always goes viral for some reason. And I think the reason being is because saving is a lot more digestible of a concept than investing is. So if someone hears saving, then they're definitely more open to it because it's something that most of us were taught, like how to save, or even if you weren't taught how to save, everyone kind of knows like you should be saving money. So high yield savings accounts came around, and Gen Z is more focused on this because they didn't really live through the 0 rate environment that didn't make, like, once when rates were 0, high yield savings accounts weren't really a thing, because that's how it works. Like as rates go up, high yield savings accounts rates go up. That content always performs well. Other than that, when I do make content on investing, I think it performs, but I think people are definitely a lot more skeptical about it because it's not something that a lot of us are taught how to do. Yeah. So I think it still gets like a lot of engagement because people just generally have a lot more questions around it.
I definitely resonate with that as well. Put my money in a high yield savings account, and then I'm, for my parents and everyone around me, they're like, invest, invest, invest. And there's just some blocker within me that's stopping me from doing that. And I know that you talk about that a lot of, no, it really pays off. And you see the 72 rule that you posted, over time, it will double to numbers that you can't even fathom at this point in your life right now. And there's just this constant struggle, at least that I've been noticing, of having visibility like right off the bat into your wallet app, let's say, or your Bank of America app or something, and seeing the exact amount of money that you have and having that sense of control over it, I guess, is something that's stopping me from investing. And but then again, when the savings account's right there, it's like, well, I'll just like take out $100 and then use that for my like night out. But it's like, no, that's not the point of the savings account. It's just like a mental gymnastics that I feel like we all have to work through.
Yeah. I feel like people underestimate how much it is mental.
That's why financial advising is as big of an industry as it is, because for the most part, financial advisors, and I'm talking about the financial advisors that like take all of your money and invest it for you, kind of like the assets under management approach. So they'll take all of your money and they'll take like a 1% fee to invest all of your money for you. They're really only investing your money into the same things that I invest my money into, like a broad market index fund or something like that. It's not like they're choosing all of these investments in a really strategic way, but the value that you get out of having that financial advisor is they take that mental load off and they talk you off the edge when you want to go pull all of your money out of your investments because you see in the news that the stock market is declining. Because it is, with a high yield savings account, it's up, 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 up slowly. And when rates go down, high yield savings accounts rates will go down, but you're never going to like lose your principal in the short term. But with investing, it's so volatile. It's so up and down in the short term that a lot of people get scared of that. So that's like why financial advising is kind of even a thing.
Yeah. Gen Z at large is very nearsighted in everything that they do. It's like they want that immediate satisfaction, or they want that result to pay off ASAP, and the concept of waiting for your account to grow or you reaping the benefits of whatever you're investing in or just whatever you're doing in life at this moment, like that happening in 30, 40 years is something I feel like a lot of Gen Zers are pretty averse to, because also, not to get into this conversation, but like not super optimistic about the future with everything that's kind of playing its part into our current society.
Like world,
Yeah.
That's also a pretty large blocker that a lot of people are trying to either shift their mindset and be like, no, it's still worth it. I'm going to live at the end of the day a better life by putting in the heavy work now and seeing it pay off down the line. Is that something that either you struggled with or you see kind of people have that similar perspective on?
I see it all the time. This is such a good point. I see it all the time in my comments, in other people posting videos between, why would I save for retirement? Like, we're not going to live that long anyway. Or why would I want to be investing for retirement? I want to spend my money now when I'm like young and can enjoy it. I do think Gen Z is kind of coming around to the idea of like, okay, well, if you don't save for retirement, if you don't start investing for retirement, you're never going to be able to retire. And that's not a good solution. And they are starting to realize like, okay, Social Security might not be a thing. Like, there's a lot of things that kind of play into, like, with the rise of the gig economy, that's great and we can make more money, but also that shifts the responsibility to invest for retirement completely onto us. You no longer have a 401k that your employer automatically contributes money into or automatically sets you up with, and they don't match your contributions or anything like that. So that really shifts the, like, if you graduate from college and you go straight into the gig economy and you don't learn about investing, you could end up being 30 years old and not even thinking about the fact that you didn't start investing for retirement. Whereas if you graduate from college and enter the traditional workforce, well, at least you still probably have a 401k to some extent that you were investing a couple percentage points into without you even really knowing it.
We are seeing this kind of firsthand. We talked about this in the episode as well, of like Gen Z really creeping into their parents' retirement funds to fund their current life of wherever they're at. So whether that is a product of the gig economy or just them being like, I need more money, it's this intergenerational kind of depletion. For those who haven't come around to the seeing like the light at the end of the tunnel of what it means to invest and set up that 401k and everything, it's kind of doing everyone a disservice and something that just totally needs to change if we all want to like be on a beach when we're 65 and like vibe, you know?
Yeah, I definitely think this is kind of a product of COVID, I want to say, and also the fact that the traditional college path has been changing and has really been challenged because of the pandemic, because when so many more people were just defaulting to going to a 4-year university when they graduate from high school, that's like a very hard cutoff from, and maybe your parents are still kind of supporting you through college a little bit, but you're still leaving the house. With COVID, even if you might have been taking college classes, if you're still living at home, what's the difference between supporting my 18-year-old and supporting my 19-year-old?
Totally.
So parents just kind of like slip into still supporting their kids into adulthood. And this is something that I actually see very firsthand because I do one-on-one coaching calls with people. If you buy my budget template, you can like book a call with me or whatever. And surprisingly, I get a lot of people that are much older, like kind of like 40s-ish. Much older than me, which like definitely surprised me. But obviously, like I don't know who is booking the call before they book it with me. And this is something that I see a lot as we're like going through someone's budget. They're like, I don't have money to be like saving for my retirement, but they're still funding a lot of their adult children's lives, which is very interesting.
It just makes sense. Like the pandemic, obviously every bucket of our lives were so significantly impacted, but the transition between high school to college is completely eliminated when you are just remaining in the same environment. Your circumstances haven't really changed other than the classes you're taking. That's why it is literally nearly half of parents have put off paying down debt to provide and support for their kids post this time of their lives. So it makes sense why it's the way it is, but it is important to kind of check yourself on that.
And that's so interesting to me because I am so pro this shift away from the traditional college kind of like environment, because Gen Z is overwhelmingly getting so fed up with the 6-figure student loan debt. And they're just seeing so many people struggling with it now that they're like, I don't want to put myself into that situation. And they are finding other ways to kind of educate themselves or go into a trade or something like that. However, you also kind of lose a lot of that. Like, okay, at 18 years old, I'm forced to move away from home, even if it is to my college dorm an hour down the road.
Yeah.
I'm still moving away from home. I think a lot of people are going to stop making that transition so early on, which could also be, I don't want to call it like detrimental, but that was so big for my personal growth at that age as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
This is so real. And I think just so important for the marketers or the brand managers or everyone listening, just to understand, to your point, of all the debt we're in or our like journey to financial literacy and being confident in our personal investments and our savings and our budgeting and all that stuff. It's not something that happens overnight for us to be like, cool, got it, everything's on lock. Let me then go on TikTok Shop. Let me go to this brand's page. Let me spend my cash immediately. It's something that I think a lot of marketers just need to keep an eye on to understand the way that they speak to us, instead of being like, buy this now.
Buy.
Or,
yeah. It's just a deeper
showing
understanding.
Compassion. Yeah,
showing compassion. At the end of the day, they want us to purchase. They want us to use the money that we are either saving or overspending. So at its core, it's what is their relationship and why, to just help the way you navigate that marketing, navigate that messaging, navigate that understanding, so that their audiences, us as Gen Zers, don't feel alienated, attacked, or just unseen in any regard, because that stuff affects you and your decision to purchase or not. Well, on that note, Erin, we'd love to know if you have any questions for us, if there's anything that you're curious about from our perspective on the brand side.
No final questions. The podcast has been so great. Even, obviously, I'm not a brand or a business, but I listened to the past couple of episodes and I think they're great because I still have my own kind of morphed little view of Gen Z through my perspective, but there's so much more to an entire generation than just my own perspective and my own like thoughts and feelings. So it's been really interesting and I'm excited to keep listening.
So glad to hear. And if there's anything you want to shout out that you're working on, or for our listeners to know, please feel free. We'd love to know.
Just the podcast. And that's really been like top of mind over the last 4 months. We started the Girls Talk Money podcast in November of 2023. And just to help young women in their 20s become more financially literate and destigmatize the concept of money. So we just have fun little like girly chats over there about different personal finance topics and things like that.
You heard it here, folks, everyone. If you want to get even more in the weeds of what we're talking about today, go over and listen. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. This was so enlightening. And again, for all you listeners, it's Erin Confortini on TikTok. Check her out. Listen to the podcast. She's amazing. We're so happy that you took the time out of your day to speak with us today.
Thank you so much. I sure as hell learned a lot. So I'm gonna go write this down in my financial notebook that I'm keeping to keep track of my stuff.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.